Extraterrestrial therapists prescribe human-friend group dynamics for social isolation. Part 1. Dr. Ara stared at the numbers on her screen for the third time that morning. They still didn't make sense. Across 47 star systems spanning 12 different species, the same pattern repeated itself. Depression rates were climbing. Suicide rates were climbing. Citizens reported feeling disconnected, isolated, and empty despite living in the most connected civilization the galaxy had ever known. She was which meant her species had been part of the galactic collective for over 6,000 years. They prided themselves on logic and efficiency. Their society ran like a perfect machine, and they had helped dozens of younger species optimize their own civilizations when they joined the collective. Every social problem had a solution. Every inefficiency could be corrected. Except this one. They are reporting a 23% increase, said her research assistant. He was his crystalline body refracting the lab's light into rainbow patterns across the walls. That's in just 5 years. They are worse, Ara replied, 31%. What about the therapy programs? They help, temporarily, but the effects don't last. Citizens complete their treatment protocols, return to their normal lives, and within months, they're isolating again. Ara stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city of Nu sprawled beneath her, all gleaming towers and efficient transport networks. Citizens moved through the streets in orderly patterns, each one connected to the city's network, each one able to communicate with anyone they needed to reach instantly. No one was ever truly alone. So why did so many of them feel that way? We're missing something, she said. Something fundamental about social connection that we've optimized away. Perhaps we should look at younger species, suggested. Ones that haven't fully integrated into collective society yet. Ara turned back to him. The pre-contact survey worlds. It's worth examining. They might show us what we've lost. 3 weeks later, Ara found herself reviewing files on a planet called Earth. The species there called themselves humans, and they were nowhere near ready for contact with the collective. They'd only just begun exploring their own star system. Their technology was primitive, their governments were fragmented, and their society was full of inefficiencies that made Ara's head hurt. But their mental health statistics were fascinating. They have depression, she told her research team during their morning meeting. They have anxiety, social problems, all the same issues we see in the collective, but look at these resilience numbers. She projected a chart into the air above the conference table. 6 other researchers leaned forward to study it. Their recovery rates are significantly higher than ours, said Priya, whose 4 eyes blinked in sequence as she processed the data, even with their primitive therapeutic techniques. Not just recovery rates, Ara added. Look at how they handle isolation. When humans experience social disconnection, they have mechanisms for rebuilding those connections that don't require institutional support. How is that possible? Asked. They don't have our communication networks, our social optimization algorithms, our professional connection protocols. Exactly, Ara said. They don't have any of that. What they have instead is something they call friend groups. She pulled up surveillance footage from Earth, carefully anonymized according to collective protocols. The image showed 5 humans sitting in what appeared to be a dwelling. They were engaged in no productive activity. They weren't working, they weren't following any structured social protocol, and they certainly weren't being efficient with their time. They were laughing. This is a typical human friend group, Ara explained. These 5 individuals have no professional connection. They don't work together. 2 of them live in different cities and see each other perhaps twice a year. They have different beliefs about religion and politics. By every logical metric, they should have no reason to maintain regular contact. Yet they do, Priya observed. They do. They message each other constantly about nothing important. They share meals together without any formal purpose. They support each other through difficulties even though they have no obligation to do so. And here's what's remarkable. Ara pulled up another chart. Humans who maintain these friend groups show dramatically better mental health outcomes than those who don't. The team studied the data in silence. It makes no sense, finally said. There's no efficiency here, no structure, no optimization. I know, Ara replied. That's what makes it so interesting. Over the next 3 months, Ara's team conducted the most comprehensive study of human social behavior ever attempted by the collective. They watched thousands of hours of surveillance footage. They analyzed communication patterns. They studied everything from small gatherings to large celebrations, from brief text exchanges to long video calls. What they found challenged everything the collective understood about social interaction. Humans, it turned out, maintained multiple types of social connections simultaneously. They had family, which made biological sense. They had colleagues, which made professional sense. But then they had these friend groups, which made no sense at all except that they clearly worked. Look at this, Ara told the team during one of their analysis sessions. She pulled up a conversation between two humans. They're discussing what one of them ate for lunch, just describing food. There's no information being exchanged that either party needs, no problem being solved, no efficiency whatsoever. And yet both participants show elevated mood markers after the exchange, Priya noted. Exactly. They found more examples. Humans who called each other just to talk. Humans who sent each other images with text on them, apparently for humor purposes, even though the humor often required extensive shared context to understand. Humans who maintained friendships across decades, even when life circumstances made those friendships difficult to sustain. They put effort into these connections, observed. Significant effort with no tangible return. The return is the connection itself, Ara said. She was starting to understand it now. We've spent optimizing for efficiency, for purpose, for structure. Every social interaction in the collective has a reason, a goal, but humans interact simply for the sake of interacting. The connection is the goal. That's illogical, another researcher said. Is it? Our citizens are isolated despite having every tool they need to connect. Humans are connected despite having inefficient, chaotic social structures. Ara looked around the table. I think we need to test something. Test what? Priya asked. What happens if we try to recreate human friend group dynamics with collective citizens? The room erupted in debate. The idea was unprecedented, ridiculous, unscientific. How could they possibly teach advanced species to behave like primitive humans? But the mental health crisis was getting worse. Traditional therapies weren't working, and Ara had spent 3 months watching humans laugh together, support each other, and build connections that seemed to defy logic yet clearly provided something essential. I'm writing a proposal, she announced, for a pilot program. We'll recruit volunteers suffering from social isolation and attempt to facilitate human-style friend groups. The council will never approve it, said. They might if we frame it properly, as experimental therapy, not as cultural adoption. And if it fails? Ara thought about the footage she'd watched. The humans sharing meals, telling stories, wasting time together in ways that somehow weren't wasteful at all. If it fails, we're no worse off than we are now, she said. But if it works, we might finally have a solution to the loneliness epidemic. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Collective Council approved her proposal. Dr. Ara was authorized to recruit 6 volunteers and attempt to create the first non-human friend group in galactic history. She just had to figure out how to teach advanced species to be friends. Part 2. The 6 volunteers sat in a circle, each maintaining precisely the correct social distance from their neighbors. Dr. Ara observed them from behind a one-way screen, already feeling the first stirrings of doubt about her experiment. There was, whose body made soft clicking sounds whenever she shifted position. Her file said she hadn't engaged in voluntary social interaction outside work protocols in 14 years. Next to her sat, his crystalline structure reflecting the room's lights in geometric patterns. He'd been referred after 3 failed conventional therapy cycles for existential depression. The others included an engineer who'd lost contact with his family decades ago, a young who'd never learned to form social bonds after being raised in an institutional education program, a massive whose species were naturally solitary but suffered greatly from it, and a whose empathic abilities made most social interaction overwhelming for her. 6 species, 6 types of isolation, one human-inspired solution that Aura was increasingly certain would fail. "Welcome," she said, stepping into the room. "Thank you all for volunteering. Over the next several months, we'll be attempting to recreate a human social structure called a friend group." "Will there be a curriculum?" asked immediately. "Are there specific protocols we should follow?" added. "What outcomes should we expect by which dates?" wanted to know. Aura had expected these questions. These were collective citizens, trained from birth to seek structure and efficiency. The idea of unstructured social time was foreign to them. "There's no curriculum," she said carefully. "Human friendships don't follow protocols. They just happen." The 6 volunteers stared at her. "They just happen," repeated. "How can we replicate something that just happens?" "That's what we're here to discover." The first month was a disaster. Aura scheduled weekly sessions where the volunteers were supposed to engage in casual conversation. Instead, they arrived with prepared topics and took turns presenting them as if delivering academic papers. When their time expired, they would stop mid-sentence and yield the floor to the next person. "You don't have to be so formal," Aura kept saying. "Just talk." "We are talking," replied confused. "No, you're presenting. Humans just chat. They interrupt each other, they go off on tangents, they circle back to previous topics." "That sounds chaotic." "It is chaotic, that's the point." But chaos didn't come naturally to species that had spent eliminating it from their societies. Even when Aura tried to model casual conversation, the volunteers would immediately try to systematize it. They created rules about interruption frequency. They developed formulas for appropriate topic duration. They made schedules for whose turn it was to share personal information. By week 6, Aura was ready to admit defeat. "It's not working," she told in her office. "They're treating friendship like an optimization problem." "Perhaps because that's how we're taught to approach everything," he replied. "Maybe I need a human consultant. The collective doesn't allow contact with pre-contact species." "There's one exception, Dr. Maya." His crystalline structure flashed with surprise. "The anthropologist. She made unauthorized contact 3 years ago. Instead of prosecuting her, the council decided her expertise might be valuable. She's been working with the Cultural Integration Department." "Will she help?" "Let's find out." Dr. Maya arrived 2 weeks later, and Aura knew within 5 minutes that she'd made the right choice. The human woman looked around the therapy room, watched exactly 30 seconds of the volunteers' carefully structured interaction, and burst out laughing. "Oh no," Maya said. "Oh, this is all wrong." "I know it's not perfect," Aura began. "Not perfect. This isn't friendship. This is a board meeting." Maya walked into the circle without asking permission, immediately violating the volunteers' carefully maintained spatial arrangement. "Hi everyone, I'm Maya. I'm human, in case you couldn't tell from the terrible posture and general chaos energy." The volunteers stared at her. "So here's the thing about human friendship," Maya continued, dropping into a chair and immediately putting her feet up on another one. Aura saw's antennae twitch with discomfort at the casual posture. "We don't do it efficiently. We do it messily, and the mess is actually the important part." "How can mess be important?" asked. Because perfection is exhausting. You can't relax around perfection. You can't be yourself. Maya pulled something out of her bag. I brought snacks. That's rule one of human friendship. There's always food and nobody cares if it's healthy. She tossed small packages to each volunteer, caught his with one massive hand and stared at it like it might explode. "What is this?" asked. "Chips, fried potato slices. Terrible for you, delicious. Open them." Over the next hour, Maya systematically destroyed every protocol the volunteers had created. She interrupted people constantly. She went off on tangents about her own life. She asked inappropriate questions about their personal experiences. She made jokes that didn't quite translate across species, and then laughed at her own failure to communicate properly. And somehow, slowly, the volunteers began to relax. "Wait, so you're saying your friend group once spent an entire evening debating whether a sandwich was a sandwich?" asked. 3 hours, Maya confirmed. "We never reached a conclusion, still argue about it sometimes." "That's absurd." "Yep, but it was fun. That's the point. Not everything needs a purpose beyond enjoying each other's company." By the end of the session, something remarkable had happened. Had made a joke. It wasn't a good joke, but the others had laughed anyway, and Ara had seen this mandible's curve in what might have been a smile. After the volunteers left, Maya turned to Ara. "You've been approaching this like it's a problem to solve. It's not. It's a relationship to build." "How do I do that?" "Stop scheduling so much. Let them message each other if they want to. Suggest they meet up outside these sessions. Give them permission to waste time together." Maya grinned. "And maybe teach them about memes. Nothing builds friendship like shared inside jokes that make no sense to anyone else." Over the following weeks, Maya transformed the sessions. She taught the volunteers how to share embarrassing stories, how to give each other ridiculous nicknames, how to support each other without trying to fix every problem, how to argue without it being a catastrophe. She introduced them to the concept of hanging out, which baffled them at first. The idea of spending time together with no agenda, no goal, no structure seemed wasteful, but Maya insisted, and gradually they began to understand. And discovered they both enjoyed a particular type of music and started sharing songs, and began meeting for meals outside the sessions, initially awkward but increasingly comfortable with each other. Started a group message thread where she shared interesting facts, and the others began responding not because they needed to, but because they wanted to. Was the breakthrough case. 4 months into the program, he arrived at a session looking different somehow. His crystalline structure seemed brighter. "I think I understand now," he said. "I was watching footage of my people from before we joined the collective, thousands of years ago, and we used to be loud, chaotic. We had festivals and gatherings and these messy, wonderful communities." He looked around at the group. "We optimized all of that away. We became efficient, but we lost something." "You lost the mess," Maya said gently. "And humans never did because we never got efficient enough to think it was worth losing." 3 months later, the transformation was undeniable. The 6 volunteers messaged each other constantly. They developed inside jokes that Ara couldn't follow. They'd started traditions, like awkward Tuesdays where they deliberately tried new activities they'd probably fail at. And their mental health metrics had improved beyond anything traditional therapy had achieved. Part 3. The results hit the collective like a shockwave. Dr. Ara's preliminary report spread through academic circles, then through medical communities, and finally reached the general public. The data was undeniable. 6 volunteers, all with chronic social isolation resistant to conventional treatment, had shown dramatic improvement using nothing but human-style friend group dynamics. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to review the findings. Ara stood before a chamber containing representatives from 47 species, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared her presentation. Behind her, holographic displays showed comparison charts, mental health metrics, and footage of the friend group's progression over 6 months. The results speak for themselves, she began. Traditional therapy provided temporary relief. Human-inspired social frameworks provided lasting transformation. It's unscientific, objected Council Member Thrain, a elderly with more traditional views. You can't replicate chaos. You can't teach randomness. This might work for 6 individuals, but it's not a systematic solution. With respect, Council Member, that's exactly the wrong way to think about it. Ara pulled up footage of and having lunch together, laughing about something trivial. We've spent trying to systematize everything. Human friendship works precisely because it isn't a system. It's organic, unpredictable, and yes, inefficient. But it fills a need that our efficient systems have created. You're suggesting we teach the entire collective to behave like primitive humans. Thrain's tone was dismissive. I'm suggesting we remember how to be inefficient together, Ara replied. Every species in this chamber evolved with social bonding mechanisms. We optimized them away in favor of efficiency. Humans never did. That's not primitive. That's wisdom we forgot. The debate raged for hours. Traditional therapists argued the methodology was too unstructured to replicate. Cultural conservatives worried about adopting alien behaviors. Economic analysts calculated the productivity losses if citizens started wasting time together. But in the end, the mental health crisis was too severe to ignore. The Council authorized a galaxy-wide expansion of the program, though with careful monitoring and academic oversight. Dr. Maya was appointed as the primary consultant for training facilitators across the collective. She found the job both hilarious and exhausting. "You want me to teach people how to be friends," she said to Ara over coffee one morning, 3 months into the expansion. "You realize how absurd that is, right?" "Completely absurd," Ara agreed, "but it's working." And it was. Across dozens of worlds, artificial friend groups were forming under human guidance. The early results mirrored Ara's pilot program. Citizens who'd been isolated for years were learning to text each other about nothing, to share meals without agendas, to support each other messily and imperfectly. Maya developed training materials that focused on unlearning rather than learning. She taught facilitators to recognize when groups were being too structured and how to inject productive chaos. She created exercises around activities that had no purpose beyond enjoyment, things like game nights, movie watching, and what humans called just hanging out. The hardest part was getting different species to understand that friendship didn't require similarity. Humans, Maya explained, could be friends with anyone. They built entire friendships around disagreeing with each other about sports or politics, or whether a particular food was acceptable. The arguing was part of the bonding. "You have to stop thinking of disagreement as failure," she told a group of facilitators. "Sometimes the best friendships are built on arguing about stupid things. My best friend and I have been debating whether our sandwiches for 15 years. We'll never agree. It's perfect." 6 months after the expansion began, Ara published her comprehensive findings. The paper was titled Human Friend Group Dynamics, a Therapeutic Framework for Social Isolation in Advanced Civilizations. It became the most-read publication in collective history. The paper detailed everything her team had learned, how efficiency in social structures could paradoxically create isolation, how allowing chaos in friendships provided emotional resilience, how supporting others without trying to fix them built stronger connections than problem-solving ever could, how inside jokes and shared experiences created bonds that formal social protocols couldn't replicate. But the most important section was the conclusion. Ara wrote, "We have assumed for that social optimization was progress. We eliminated inefficiency, chaos, and unpredictability from our interactions, believing this would improve quality of life. Instead, we created a society where citizens are never alone but frequently lonely. Humans, by maintaining their inefficient social structures, preserved something essential that we lost: The question now is whether we can reclaim it. The impact was immediate and widespread. Therapists across the collective began training in the new methodology. Universities added courses on human social dynamics. Public spaces were redesigned to encourage spontaneous gathering rather than efficient movement. Message protocols were modified to allow for casual, purposeless communication. The cultural shift was profound. For the first time collective citizens were encouraged to be inefficient, to waste time, to maintain relationships that served no practical purpose. And slowly, the loneliness epidemic began to recede. Reconnected with her family after nearly 2 decades of isolation, the friend group gave her the confidence to reach out, and more importantly, taught her how to maintain connections even when they were messy. Her siblings were initially confused by her new casual communication style, but gradually adapted to it. She reported that family gatherings were now actually enjoyable rather than obligatory. Found new purpose in his work, but more importantly, he found joy in activities completely unrelated to work. He started a hobby group for crystalline art that met weekly. They called themselves the Shiny Objects Club, which insisted was an inside joke that only made sense if you'd been there from the beginning. The original 6 volunteers became advocates for the program. They gave talks at universities, helped train new facilitators, and most importantly, maintained their own friendship even as the program expanded beyond them. Their weekly gatherings continued, now a genuine source of connection rather than a therapeutic exercise. 18 months after the pilot program began, the Galactic Council officially recognized human-style social frameworks as legitimate therapeutic interventions. Mental health metrics across the collective showed the most significant improvement in recorded history. Depression rates dropped. Suicide rates dropped. Citizens reported feeling connected in ways they hadn't experienced since childhood, before their societies fully optimized social interaction. Humanity, still unaware of the collective's existence, continued their ordinary lives. They maintained their friend groups, argued about trivial things, sent each other memes, and supported each other through difficulties with a chaotic efficiency that the entire galaxy was now trying to learn. When the time finally came for official contact, 4 years after Ara's pilot program, the collective's first diplomatic mission to Earth had an unusual request. They wanted to observe human social gatherings, not governments or militaries or scientific institutions, just ordinary people being friends. Maya arranged for the diplomatic team to observe her own friend group's weekly game night. The aliens watched in fascination as 6 humans argued passionately about strategy, accused each other of cheating, laughed at inside jokes nobody bothered to explain, and generally created the kind of beautiful chaos that had saved the galaxy's mental health. "This is what changed everything," one of the diplomats asked Maya. "This is it," she confirmed, "just people being friends." "It's remarkable. It's ordinary, that's what makes it remarkable." The Council granted humanity a unique designation in the collective's files, essential social architects. They were offered immediate membership, unusual for such a young species. The reasoning was simple. If humanity had solved the loneliness problem by accident, by simply never optimizing it away, what else might they teach the galaxy? Humans, characteristically, were less impressed by the formal title and more interested in the alien species they could now be friends with. Dr. Ara's research team, now genuine friends rather than just colleagues, celebrated the successful first contact with a party. They invited the original 6 volunteers, Maya, and several other humans who'd helped with the expansion program. The event was supposed to be a formal reception, but quickly devolved into exactly the kind of chaotic gathering that had started everything. Ara found herself standing with Maya on a balcony, watching the party inside, was teaching a human how to play a tile game, and 3 were engaged in what appeared to be dance, though nobody seemed certain. Someone had started a debate about whether spiral galaxies were better than elliptical galaxies, which had somehow turned into an argument about food. "You save the galaxy," Maya said, "by teaching everyone to waste time together." "We save the galaxy," Ara corrected, "by learning what humans never forgot. That connection matters more than efficiency. That chaos has value. That sometimes the best use of time is using it for no purpose at all." Think the Council understands that now. Some of them, others still think it's illogical. Is it illogical? Ara watched laugh at something said, two beings who would never have spoken to each other before the program. She thought about the millions of collective citizens who were learning to be inefficient together, to support each other messily, to build connections that served no purpose except to make life worth living. "Maybe," she said, "but sometimes the illogical thing is the right thing. Humans taught us that." Inside, someone dropped a plate and everyone cheered. It was inefficient, chaotic, and served absolutely no productive purpose. It was perfect.